Hi guys, welcome back to the Kaleidospoke podcast with myself, Aaron, and the wonderful host, Richie Rich. If you haven't listened to any of our podcasts before, subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, even go and follow us on our socials, Instagram, Twitter, leave us a review, like, download, do everything to like make your life full of Kaleidospoke. That's it, basically. That's all you got to do. Today, we're joined by like an amazing guest, and I'll tell you a story before I introduce her. I'll tell you a story how I met this person. So in my day job, she happened to kind of just come in my car. Was going on a long journey, and somehow like we just instantly started talking about like life and the world like that we're in, and we even got to talk about Matrix and simulation. We went proper deep. And at the end of it, I was like, I think we just kind of solved the entire world. Like all of the world's issues were like solved in this like 1 hour journey. And I was thinking, man, what if I could like have a conversation like this again with my friend. Rich is good. He's a good enough friend. And maybe if there was like a platform like something like Spotify or Apple or one of these things, and maybe if I had a podcast, maybe we could just do this all again. Maybe. And we kind of got that. So I think it's probably a good idea that we do that. So Edith, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm good. Thank you for having me. The story is true, like now that I think about it, I'm like, how did we even get onto the topic of what we spoke about, and how did we do it? I don't even remember. But yeah, thank you for having me.
It's no problem. Like this conversation is just it's another good one. We're just relaxing. I think like for all of us three, these type of topics are just gonna like hit right home. Man, like Rich, how you doing, bro?
All is well. Cannot complain. Life is beautiful.
Yeah. How was your Sunday?
It was pleasant. Went down to Camden, got some halloumi and falafel wrap, which is great. I love the halloumi.
Okay.
And I'm just filling you in. Then I came back, had a nice tuna steak. Oh, great. Fantastic.
Sounds like you're living, bro. Sounds like you're living.
The dream.
Sure. All right, so we got some great topics to talk about today, but this is like an emergency topic. This is a topic that is like, yes, this needs to come out. We need to have a discussion about this because it's been talked about all week. Last weekend, I believe, there was an infamous interview with Meghan and Prince Harry. Prince Harry, like the British royal Prince Harry, man like Harry. And in the interview, a ton of information was revealed that doesn't necessarily paint the royal family in a good light. Now, Meghan has been involved with the royal family for a number of years now, and actually her time with the royals has been questionable. It doesn't seem as if maybe versus Kate Middleton, she hasn't had the same type of treatment. And also, not simply by the royals, by some British kind of, I don't know, like the public, right? Like a ton of the public have had a ton of criticisms towards us, many of them unfounded. And I think, yeah, man, it's worth discussing what happened. Like, how has this got to a point where this lady has managed to find herself in a situation where she feels under threat, in a situation where she feels truly unaccepted, and somehow, has managed to have to come out within podcasts and interviews and even talk about relinquished royal duties. And this is a first for the royal family, but it's also a first for, British society. Edith, what did you think about when you probably woke up and saw an Insta or whatever you was looking on, and you saw this like interview with Oprah?
You know what? The first thing I thought of was actually good on her for one, getting this completely just global, because there's so many, it's so multifaceted. But I think the main thing that I took from watching the interview was the thing that she said, where this is such a good fairy tale for all women all around the world, but not even just women, like just everyone in general, where, you know, one part where she was saying that she was watching The Little Mermaid, right? And she just instantly kind of saw herself where, you know, Ariel basically had to lose her voice to fall in love with the prince, and essentially she felt the same, but now she's got her voice back. And that for me was like, she nailed it on the coffin, like 100%. You know, she did get her voice, and actually so did Harry, because essentially, right, like it's not, for me, it wasn't just about Meghan. It was actually for Harry as well, and actually for their kid Archie. Like, you know, the whole point of doing this interview was to, one, yes, get her voice back, but also Diana's. That was a huge thing for me. You know, like it's truly everyone on Instagram and Twitter and everyone was saying, you know, this whole interview was Diana's legacy being carried out, right? Because Diana had all these interviews, and unfortunately for her, it wasn't as global, and she didn't have social media the way that Meghan did. I just think good on her, you know, for getting everything out that she needed to say, and to actually kick a lot of people who are very, very, you know, pro-monarchy and all of that, and decide to like pretend to not see the media. And, you know, the media is very obvious about the way they treat Meghan. And as someone who's in marketing and I've done PR, you know, headlines are important. It doesn't just paint the picture for, you know, the situation, but also paints the picture for how you should see every situation from there on. So good on her is what I think.
Yeah, totally. It's really interesting that the interview kind of brought up parallels between Meghan's position and Diana, and you know how Diana was treated in the royal family as well. You know, it all came up, and you know, while there was a ton of commentary around racism and these types of things, you know, Harry is a part of this too. You know, and it was quite interesting to see, you know, that he'd been able to feel comfortable almost to talk outside of his whole legacy. You know, like he is part of a bloodline that has been going for centuries, you know, and he's almost come out to speak against it because he sees a blatant injustice going on here. So it's wild. It's kind of wild.
Wild.
You know, like Harry's always kind of been one of those guys who's sort of outside. He's always had this, or the media have portrayed him to be, and I believe this plays his part, right? Like, he's always been this kind of conscious boy, and like maybe this kind of a cloud was over his head due to his mum, and never quite got over it, and like, you know, really kind of affected from Princess Diana. So yeah, I feel like it's always been there behind him, like this media, this story, and now it's just blown up. I mean, I think, you know, from like, you can imagine Meghan and Harry when they first got together and getting to know each other, getting acquainted, you know, his backstory as he shared it was building these preconceptions of the royal family and how it was to Meghan, right? So she in herself must have been going through a very kind of loop like process in her mind as to how is this going to work? You know, what can she expect? And it feels like all of this has sort of played out to how she perhaps expected it. Perhaps even worse. I don't know, but I can definitely imagine these conversations pre her being introduced to the family in such a way and being married into the family gave her this sort of this expectation that it's going to be challenging, it's going to be tricky, and yeah, I mean, yeah, good for her that she spoke out, and you know, it goes to show like how unprogressive the establishment is, because they couldn't control the situation. And I'm hoping that, I don't think it's just that they couldn't control it, and I think these things played out. I don't think it's like you know, it's her being dramatic or her being like a prima donna kind of thing. Perhaps there's partial, but I mean, I think it's just that it's very steady, very square into what they can do and what they can say, etc. And I definitely feel like she just didn't fit that mold as much as Kate did, because Kate feels like she just slipped right in. She just like, yeah, that's the princess, that's the next one. Whereas Meghan's like, whoa. I think there was like one article in the newspaper when they first got together saying, is she straight out of Compton? you know, like, you know, like get a rich, get a hood kind of thing. It's crazy. And, you know, all of these things, this obviously will play on you.
There's a lot. No, I'm just saying there's a lot to think about, you know, like I think there's two sides to everything, right? Like what Harry was saying, that I think it was when Oprah asked him, like, when they were talking about him wanting to see her and then the Queen couldn't and she kind of cancelled. And the way he responded, I was like, very, you know, it's really respectful, where he was like, it wasn't just her decision. Like, there's a lot of advisors around her and everything. Like you were saying, it's everything's quite square and constructed, and, you know, it has to play a certain way. And you're right. I don't think Meghan fit into that at all. But I think, you know, when they were getting acquainted and when they probably met, I think it was a breath of fresh air for Harry, like to be able to see someone. And, you know, there's a lot of people that say that, you know, Meghan and Diana kind of mirror each other in certain aspects, in certain ways, in the sense where they're very open and she can talk and she can kind of like, you know, voice her opinion and stuff, right? And I think for Harry, that was probably like a moment where he was like, okay, I can be the person to now speak up, and I can say these things because I also have a partner who's going to support me and going to back me, rather than be, you know, just the Duchess or whatever and play her part, because it's so much more than playing your part nowadays. And I think the fact that, you know, society has changed so much where you can use your voice and you should say something rather than just fit into a mold, I think that plays a huge role. But you're right, like Harry's always been a little bit, you know, different. And I think, you know, it scares like molds, and it scares like, you know, things that have been a set way for so long. And for him to kind of go completely against the grain is a bit like, whoa, like what's happening? In a good way, though. I think it needed to be shaken up, because a lot, you know, it's not just Meghan's story. I think the reason why people feel so close to it and are so engaged with it is because obviously, you know, it's an issue, but also it goes back to everything with Diana that people never got closure from. People are obsessed with that. You know, on TikTok, there's all these Diana scroll holes, and I got lost in it, but I was like, damn, there's a lot out there that people haven't resolved or haven't got over and still want to know. And so they've latched that onto the whole Meghan thing. And that's just what it is. It's now an ongoing legacy, I guess.
You make a good point on the fact that, you know, Harry might have been not in a position to kind of speak up and do this, but perhaps this is quite his opportunity to flee the situation that he's never really wanted or be in, because he might see it as toxic or something like that, because of, you know, his mum, etc. And you're right, you know, maybe he found strength in her, and this has been, you know, all that he's kind of ever, not say all he wanted, but an opportunity time for him to, you know, exit group, as we say.
Yeah. Yeah. He's always kind of been like the royal that, you know, like people like myself, people like us, commoners, could see and be like, you know what, I'd probably spend a night out with him. You know, he seems like a kind of a decent dude. You know, I think I'd have a good time. Yeah. So yeah. Again, Edith, you're probably correct in the sense that, yeah, he now has this opportunity to, you know, just break away from that. And actually, this represents like a new frontier for the royals. You know, like number one, you know, Harry himself, through his, you know, choice in Lady, is kind of like broken a particular mold, and now the public are ever more involved, because like not only is this lady not British, you know, she's not white. There's a ton of things that are very different, and you've got like a ton of interest from the Americans as well, because she's American. So now there's eyes, and there's a lot of eyes on this. So this is almost like a new frontier for the royals, and is questioning whether or not the mode that the aristocracy in this country has had for so long is still relevant today. You know, like, can you still continue with the idea of, you know, like, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to look like? And maybe somebody like Harry represents like just a new set of royalty. You know, like, you can kind of be cool. Maybe brings a different dynamic to the royal family, you know? And maybe this whole thing, as time plays out, it might give more notoriety to the royal family if more and more people in aristocracy come out and behave this way, because there's kids coming all the time. Like William has kids. Are they going to be like their uncle Harry? It'll be interesting to see how this particular event will shape the future and the trajectory for the royal family. It's a crazy time. It's crazy.
That's
crazy.
That's if that happens. I mean, there's a part of me that hopes it does, because they're setting an example for future generations, right? But there's a whole other side that, so before I came to England, I had no idea that there even was a royal family. That's how unknown that is to, I guess, Asia. When I arrived and people were like, yeah, the queen, I was like, what queen? You got a mayor, and I know you got whatever, and you got the government party, whatever, but a queen. It's so interesting, when I started really understanding the royals, I was like, what? They don't have Netflix, they can't have social media. I don't think, and this is just a personal opinion, and I'd want to see change. I'd want to see the next generation be a bit more open and be a bit more fluid and be a bit more engaging, and maybe be allowed to watch Netflix. That would be nice, because I feel like they're missing out on life. But I also just
big hole
change, it's, and I think that you're right. This could be the turning point, and maybe in the future, for the trajectory of the future, then things will change. But I struggle to see it changing, because there's so many aspects, there's so many parts of the royalty and the royal family that they want to uphold and keep. And there's something that makes me feel a bit uncomfortable about it, but I'm also like, I get it. It's history. And it's a huge part of, for a lot of people, it's a really big pride thing. They're really proud to love the queen, her majesty, and I get it. I respect it. I'm like, cool. That's some countries in Asia still have a king and queen, and it's quite symbolic and everything. And changing that is not just changing it for the future, but you're essentially lifting up roots of history and beliefs and symbolic things and features and everything, and you're just deciding to be like, nope, let's dump that somewhere else and let's change that. I don't know. I'm optimistic enough to be like, I want a change to happen, because then this event, which is historical, isn't just going to be for nothing. It's not just going to be a social fad. It's not just going to be a passing moment or a fleeting moment, right? I want it to be something that actually induces change, or induces at least thought process to change. I hope,
I mean, it's interesting. The royal family is a very, very strong brand for the UK, right? The reason why people come here. They also probably, in a sort of covert way, a reason why United Kingdom still has a good amount of credence at the table. I think all this sort of this challenge to the monarchy and to the establishment is interesting. It can go two ways, and it could have went another way, because this was an opportunity for the royal family to accept and embrace and sort of portray that they're progressive. But in the other sense, now they've kind of gone the other route. Maybe they could have prevented it. I'm not too sure, because they have their own principles, etc. But now it's gone the other way, and it's like, will this damage the brand enough? And that might play out depending on how big Meghan and Harry get. Their voice. They've signed a lot of deals recently with Netflix, with Spotify. They're pretty good on branding, and so as their brand gets stronger, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Will that challenge, or that they're sort of rising up, would that sort of constantly challenge the royals to consider, or etc. It might be another episode of EastEnders. It's just we're just going to see this back and forth, and who's going to invite who for Christmas and all this kind of stuff. It's interesting times, but I feel like the establishment has sort of failed at this point to kind of show that Britain is multicultural, right? I mean, it's very multicultural, and the world is progressive, and we're pretty much yeah, we're a pretty open country, I'd say. And so for the royals who represent the country to kind of not fail to try and salvage this problem properly, it's a bit of a letdown. It's a bit of a letdown for sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's quite interesting. I was I was listening to LBC on James O'Brien's show, and he had these two YouTubers on who'd actually managed to play some type of prank on the basically the PR representatives of the royal family. So this prank involved them. So the Oprah interview hadn't come out yet, and actually these YouTubers posed as some type of correspondence to the royal correspondents and said, okay, this interview hasn't come out. They've said it to them. And then they questioned them on what Meghan has said on the interview that hasn't come out. And it's almost as if like these royal correspondents had like pre-made answers, pre-made answers to say, yeah, she's been, she's been behaved abhorrently. They would give examples of things that hadn't actually necessarily been, the interview hadn't been conducted yet. And it's almost as if, they would talk about things that she hadn't said on the interview, but like almost pre-made. They've got a pre-made response in anticipation that she's just going to say, defame the royal family, which again, like it shows almost like a failure of integration here. It's like here is a member of the aristocracy, an important member of the aristocracy, inviting his new spouse, I don't know what they call it in that world,
side chick.
I don't know if it's a side chick, bro. I don't think side chicks work that way. Hey, you know what? Yeah, and so yeah. Anyway, they've that this is how they've accepted her. You know what? Yeah, to kind of like bring it down a bit. Imagine going to this party where Harry's at, and then obviously someone must have introduced the two of them. Whoever that person is, they deserve like everything. They deserve all of it. Like whatever it is, give it to them.
That's what they need. Like a recognition. Well done for changing the world and their relationship.
Yeah.
That's what they need.
For sure. If that's Meghan's friend, then boy, that is best friend for life. BFF. But again, like what's another aspect which has been really interesting is the public's response, because it's a dual thing. You've got, again, and this is pretty much the tone of the day. You've got two sides, generally two polarizing sides. You've got a side that are like progressive, like, wow, this type of things shouldn't be happening. And you've got the side that are like, well, she's treated the servants terribly. Number one, they have no public member of the public has been in the house to watch any of this happen, but they've seemed to build up an idea of who Meghan is. And these people, you could argue that they have an idea of what the royal family should be, what the UK does represent, and Meghan does not fit into that idea. So they almost have like a narrative, like this is whatever she does is not going to be right, And quite interestingly, the first point of call, when they're challenged about this, they generally say, well, look at Kate, and Kate has somehow become the the poster child for marrying into the royal family, which again might create quite a lot of pressure on her. I don't know the relationship between her and Meghan and her and the royal family. She might have had these similar issues and it just never was discussed. Maybe, I don't know. But the attitude of the public, again, polarizing as ever on every subject. It's interesting to see it in action.
You know what? It was funny. I think part of the interview I watched, right, and it was like Harry talking about him asking the media, the paparazzi, to kind of just step back. Do you know what I mean? And I think, I think he was saying, or whatever I was listening to was saying that the royal family are very entrenched in the media. They can make things, they can control a narrative. They're very cozy with the media. And so, like, for the fact that I think Harry was repeatedly saying, can you just like leave us be, let us be, just leave us alone. And he wasn't getting any backing from his family. And he feels like they could have stepped in and helped control the narrative, be a bit more front-footed on the whole situation. And I think all like those kind of things coming from him definitely calls it out to say that they were a bit funny with the whole situation. I don't know what you guys' thoughts were on the different incidents that happened, like how dark the baby was, Archie not being a prince, something about avocados, like I don't know what's like, if it's all very much that's how it, like a matter of fact, or there is a bit of misconstrued or bits of it. That's what I don't know.
See, the thing that I think about the media, right? Like, the media has been responsible for many, 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 many celebrities' downfalls, crashes. Like, it's a problem. It's a problem not just for people of a public figure, but also if we're gonna talk about the media, and I think the media plays a huge role in protection, right? Like the overall arching theme is protection, right? And I agree with what you were saying, that, well, not that I agree, but like what Harry was saying about how they could have stepped forward. They could have done something. The royal family absolutely could have, because at the end of the day, right, the royal family don't want to be perceived in any way, shape, or form that's negative. So it's very interesting that they've let the media portray Meghan as a complete villain. Like, straight up, they've just completely let Meghan be painted as a villain, let Meghan be painted in such a horrible light. And I remember seeing on Instagram this like comparison thing of like different headlines with Kate and Meghan, and it was absolutely awful. But, going back to my point about the media, like, the media itself is a problem. And I don't just mean for people in like the public eye, but also in like, situations, world events and stuff like that. We're talking like genocide and things like that. Like, the media will always try and portray it in a very interesting light, because the media is basically telling people, like 70-80% of people who completely love and trust and pour all their faith into headlines rather than reading a whole thing and then deciding to look into it from another perspective, and they believe the first headline they ever do. That in itself is a problem. And then we add in the royal family. Like I said earlier, absolutely they should have and would have put their foot in, because why would they ever want anything negative like on behalf of their family? So that in itself is like a massive, in my like opinion anyway, a massive thing, and them saying, we do not view Meghan as family. Why would you let someone trample on your daughter-in-law, essentially your next royal family member? And the way that they've done it is just, they've for a while in the summer when Wimbledon was on, portrayed like Kate and Meghan as rivals at some point. And I was like, that is, I mean, we don't know, but that is also ridiculous. Like, as if like two women need any more unwanted attention. And like you said, we don't know if Kate has had issues in the past, but she's always been viewed as like the perfect fairy tale, the perfect princess. And it's not that it's her fault. It is completely the media's and them, favoring her. And that's great. But why are we so quick to judge Meghan? Why are we so quick to, target her skin? Why are we so quick to target her baby bump? Why are we so quick to target her body language when, are you a body language specialist? No, you're just some journalist, as bad as that sounds. I'm not saying that journalists don't know, but you are not a body language specialist. How are you going to say that her being a certain way when Harry was, walking down some red carpet thing, an event, why are you targeting little things like that when you have absolutely no clue? Like what you were saying, Aaron, about how the public are like, oh, she treats servants really badly. You've not been in the house. How would you know? It's the media just with these crazy headlines picking up on little things that people are going to then really just blow up and be like, oh my God, let's villainize her because we can. And it's so easy to, because when the media, which is a representation of 90% of people's thinking, which isn't true, but we somehow believe it is, let's just be a sheep and let's just follow and let's just villainize. And, I was having a conversation with my mom about Meghan, and she's like Vegemite or Marmite, you know, people love or people hate, and there's no in between, to be honest. Although there is, like, you know, there's some people that are like Switzerland, they're like, oh, you know, I don't really care, because they just don't care about the royal family and they don't really care, but they know that she stands for different things. And I just think, let's just all remove this like concentrated conversation away from Meghan as an individual, and let's actually look at what everything is being represented here. You know, like we were saying earlier, it's not just about Meghan, it's also about Harry. But everybody is so quick to be like, let's kind of skim over the fact that Harry is also using this situation to bring out his voice and bring out his opinions and talk about things that have been harrowing for him. You know, he obviously hasn't had the time to really heal from everything that happened with his mom. And let's just shift all the blame to Meghan. Meghan. I don't know how she's done it and how she's actually still, you know, been on her 2 feet. She obviously has a great support system and everything. But if that was me, I would be like, no, that's it. I'm going to migrate to the middle of nowhere and I'm just going to live in a hut and just, I don't want the media. You know, it's tough. It's really, really tough.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to ask both of you, why do you think the British media has targeted Meghan? Like, give one reason. Like, I know there are plenty, but which do you think would be the main reason as to why the British media said, actually, no, this person is going to get it from us and we're going to turn the public on her? So, Rich, I'll start with you, and then Meghan. I'm not Meghan. You're not Meghan.
Wow.
Edith.
Close.
Yeah, close, I guess, you know, whatever you want. But Edith, I'll come to you after. So, yeah, Rich, what do you think the number one reason behind the media kind of like causing the public to kind of have a bad outlook on Meghan?
It's hard to say number one, you know, because I think it's multifaceted, right?
Look, I'm going to stop you. I'm going to stop you before you go into that, yeah? One, bro, just choose one. I know it's multifaceted. There are at least five very, very, very good reasons. But if you had to choose one, what would you think it is?
Her ethnicity. That's it.
Fair. Edith?
Controversial, but inherent racism.
Yep. I'm inclined to agree. It's just because it just seems obvious, you know. It's like, actually, this is the only real difference here, you know. And you know, it doesn't paint the British media and parts of the British public in a very good light, you know, globally, not at all.
But then, you know, like I do say that, but even, you know, if you abstract that away, there's a box. Everybody has a box in their mind of different people. You could be black, you could be Asian, you could be white, or you could be from the UK, you could be from France. Okay, French people like bread. Yeah, they like frog's legs. Oh, and they like snails. But if you like jerk chicken and you're from France, like, okay, whoa, you know, this is a different French person that I know from my box. So there's a royal box, and she just definitely didn't fit that box in the media's eyes. And so it could have been anyone. Maybe, I mean, okay, if it was someone from Russia, probably easier, rich oligarch. But yeah, if it was someone from Brazil, I don't know. They might say congratulations. You got yourself a Brazilian, hot Brazilian. I don't know, but I mean, but she came from Compton, so you know it got. God damn it! Easy. So I don't know, man. Like there's a lot to write about, and I think the media just is fueled on headlines, as Edith mentioned. So she was an easy target, and so you know the weakest link. And, you know, fell victim.
I don't want to believe that, you know, racism and ethnicity and skin color is a big thing, but I think it's, like you were saying, Rich, like, you know, she's an easy target. And what's the next easy target that the media can utilize to scrutinize her is her skin color, right? And also the fact that she is very loud and proud and is an activist and has a voice and had a platform and had a career. So, you know, I want to believe that even, okay, if she wasn't an actress before and she didn't have a following and she didn't have a public presence, I want to believe that the royal family would have accepted her and let her do the royal family thing. And I think there's a huge part that plays to all of this is the fact that she did have a presence and she does have a voice and she is, you know, a feminist, for example, like one of her, you know, interests and passions. And I think that already started to shake the boat. You know, it started to really rock the boat. And they were like, for someone who is very vocal and very loud and proud, combined with her race, does that, like you're saying, fit the mold? Because I'm sure, and this is me just trying to be optimistic, because I do think that there's a lot of inherent, you know, colonialism and there's a lot of issues, but this is the same with any country. I feel like there's a lot of pride in your, I don't know, your nationality, I guess, for some people and for people who are very, very pro monarchy and all of that. I think when you just combine those two things, it's just like that this is a lot that you're asking us to change. You know, this is a lot that you're asking us to accept. And from a very non-biased point of view, like I get that. Like they're, you know, it's huge. It's a really big thing. Like they already had Diana, who was then going to the press and having interviews, and that was already shaking the boat and rocking the boat for them. But she was white, so it was kept quite, you know, within the UK. And like you were saying, there's eyes everywhere now. So for them, it's just like, this is a lot you're asking us to change and asking us to do, and we don't like it, so we are not going to partake in it. And for them, that might have, you know, been the best thing, because they're like, we don't want to partake, we don't want to, you know, we don't want anything to do with it. But I don't think they realize that doing that is a bigger statement, right? Because then they're letting the slander, they're letting everything happen behind closed doors, and they're just kind of being all hush hush about it and turning a blind eye to it, which is worse. But I guess I could see that for them, that might have just been, in that moment, probably the best thing forward, because it's like, we accept you, but we just don't want to partake in anything. You know, and to me, that's the worst thing you could do, right? Because it's literally like, with everything going on in the world, when you raise an issue with someone and they just kind of turn a blind eye, that's part of the problem, right? This is the whole issue, is that is exactly the problem, when you don't get involved and you pretend. It's like when people are like, you know, I don't want to vote because I don't get it. And I'm just like, that's okay, but you should probably look into it, or, you know, find something that gives you a reason not to. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things. And I think everything going on, they've kind of dug themselves a hole. I don't think there's much that they can do now, especially with all the, you know, the signing and the deals going on. It's just there's a lot, you know, and I feel for the kids of the future who have to learn about this, where there might be a divide. There might be, I'm not saying there is going to be, but there might be, where, you know, some people might understand one side more and some people might be very neutral and understand both. And there's going to be some that are very, you know, the other sided. And it's just interesting, because it's just a whole new debate, a whole new discussion that people can learn and take and partake in and decide not to. And it's just very interesting.
Yeah, super. I mean, it is literally, for this whole week, it is everywhere. You know, everybody's got an opinion. You know, you could ask anybody from any type of credence and they've got an opinion on this. All right. So speaking about cultural identity, I think it's time we kind of move on to our next subject. And this subject is about how your culture, if your culture, defines who you are. You know, so with it, again, it's quite interesting to even define what your culture is, you know, because I think that, you know, you have an ethnic culture, you have almost like an environmental culture. There's a ton of things that go into what is known as a culture. And how much does that define who you are? Because you're an individual too, you know? So I guess, you know, I was born here. I'm from the UK. And my parents are Caribbean. So growing up, there were parallels between me and some of my white counterparts, but there were huge differences as well. Do you know what I mean? It was like, oh yeah, I've never told my mum to F off. You Do you know how many generations of people would beat me? Like the beatings would come in my sleep. I'm not even awake and I'm still getting beat. You know what I mean? So it was like it's quite interesting to see how, you know, my culture has the culture of my parents and my growing up has molded me into who I am today. Yet there are times when I have the decision to make as an individual to say, okay, am I going to go with my cultural teachings, or am I going to go with what I've learned as a human in this particular environment that I'm in? And yeah, I thought it'd be like a great subject to talk about because Edith, I know you were born in China, right?
Hong Kong.
So, you know, both myself and Rich were born here. You were born in a different country. I mean, what's your kind of journey been with this particular subject?
It's a very interesting one. And I identify as a third culture kid. You know, I'm very international. I was born in Hong Kong. I went to school in an Australian school. So I'm actually Australian by citizen. And I had the accent. I had a really thick Aussie accent for years. I had, oh my God, it was so thick. And I came to the UK for school. I was very fortunate and very lucky. And, you know, my parents have done and sacrificed a lot for me. And I came here for school. And the first thing everyone said was, I don't understand what you're saying. Like, it doesn't match. Like, that's the thing that I've had my whole life is your accent, your voice doesn't match, you know, you. And I just find it really interesting that people would be like, you, because they don't want to generalize me. They don't want to be like, you know, an Asian can't speak English, which I was like, interesting in itself. And then I picked up like a really mixed accent because I think I wanted to adapt so much. But yeah, a third culture kid, I guess, is what a lot of us international kids call ourselves because there's such a mix. There's such a, like, there's so many like flows and essences of different cultures. But I would say that there's a huge part of me that loves my Chinese culture and my heritage. I didn't really get to learn much about it when I was growing up because my mom pushed me into being westernized. She wanted me to learn English. English was my first language. She wanted me to, you know, explore because she'd lived in Australia for a while. So she had a very, very westernized, but in an adult, like in her like 30s onwards. And I think she saw elements of it that were really great. And so she wanted me to benefit. So she pushed me into an international school from a very young age. But growing up, I had obviously very traditional parents, still traditional grandparents, aunties, uncles. It was always really mixed. And then I came here and I was 12 when I arrived, just turned 12. No, turning 13, like towards the end of 12 years old. And I spent actually like from there on off, I've been in the UK since. So I've essentially, I would say that it's very confusing because I feel like I've grown up here. I've done a majority of my pubescent life in the UK, but also around a lot of other cultures and a lot of other people. And it's just very interesting because there's a part of me that's still holding on to my Chinese culture and heritage, especially now that I've grown older. You know, I've used to actually, and this is interesting because I was in international school and I was surrounded by a lot of Western kids and people, I wasn't really immersed with my culture in the day. And it was only on weekends or if I heard my parents speaking Cantonese that I felt part of the Chinese culture. So I actually felt very like neglected from that side. And so I think I really tried to latch on to a Western culture. And I really honestly, for like 13 to like 19, 20 years old, I didn't identify as Chinese. I would always identify as Australian. And there was a part of me that was very not ashamed, just like I just didn't feel like I belonged because I didn't grow up speaking Chinese or Cantonese and I had to learn it as a second language. And then I felt really ashamed because I'm Chinese, so I should know Chinese. And then obviously I was here for school and I was surrounded by all these kids and English was my first language. And I was so not what the typical Chinese kid is. You know, I was out in the sun a lot. I did a lot of sport. And my grandparents would be like, why are you always so tanned? And I'd be like, well, why is that a problem? You know, so there's a lot of like friction going on. And it wasn't until I turned about 20 that I realized I didn't really know much about my culture. So I actually called my mom and we had a really good talk. And she used to say to me, she was like, well, you used to cry whenever you went to Chinese tutor because I would have to do it after school and I wasn't able to do the sports with all my friends. And so I felt like I was being punished. And now looking back on it, I was like, actually, I really wish I paid attention in those classes more.
Mm.
Yeah, I guess third culture kid, because I still hold on to, and I'm learning more and more. And there's some aspects of the culture and the traditions that we kept on, like, you know, Mid-Autumn Festival, Chinese New Year. That's always been a big celebration. Those are the big fun ones. But things like, you know, culture in the sense where I'm the same. I would. Well, back then, now it's a little bit more lenient, but I could never swear at my mother. Oh my goodness, I would get beating, and I used to get beat like, you know, and when I came to school and I would tell like my friends, like, oh yeah, my mom hits me with, you know, a broomstick, they'd be like, child abuse. And I'd be like, no, culture. You know, like, different things. Or, you know, the way that like in Chinese, the way I speak to my mom is very, very open. Like we're very, very open. And I feel like it sounds like we're arguing all the time, but it's just the language. It's quite hard, the tonal values and everything. And people would be like, why are you always arguing with your mom? And I'm like, I'm not arguing with her. Like, where is this coming from? We're just having a conversation. But yeah, third culture. It's I feel like there's a big part of me that is westernized. I don't know if we're going to be specific. I don't know which parts. I think I'm very British in some sense, and people just call me international because they don't know how to identify it. And to be honest, I don't either.
Do you like it? I mean, do you like the fact that you've had this sort of quite diverse background?
Yes, I do. I think now I've fully accepted that actually it really plays a huge part of who I am. And I think it's honestly quite advantageous in, like, you know, job searching and job hunts and stuff like that. People really like that because they're like, oh, like, you know, you must be really open-minded. And I'm like, sure, if that's what you want to call it. And I think people, you know, if I'm at a job interview, people really respect it in a way, because they're like, okay, so you're aware that you can't, you know, you're not biased, essentially. They automatically have that initial response that I'm not going to be biased because I'm so open to different cultures and I'm so respectful about them, which is interesting because I didn't like it before, because people would always say to me, and this is something that I grew up with for years. It only kind of stopped last year. I don't know why. I think just because of, you know, in light of like the world events and everything, people are becoming a lot more switched on and a lot more sensitive around things. But the thing that I used to always get was, your English is so good for a Chinese person. And my initial response used to just be, thank you. Then it turned into a bit of like, well, you did colonize Hong Kong, so like, you think that I could speak English. I mean, it's interesting, you know. I got that so much, and for a while it used to really annoy me and aggravate me, because I'd just be like, why are you saying this? Do you know what I mean? Like, why is that a thing? And now I'm just like, yeah, I love it. It's just who I am, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That's it. You got to love who you are. You have to love who you are, and I think it's a beautiful thing to have a diverse background. I mean, myself, you know, mixed heritage. So my mum is English, my dad has Jamaican heritage, and I love it. Right? It's that sort of that mix of cultures just makes everything and life richer. So your experiences, whether or not, you know, you're born into this culture or you're born into two different cultures, etc. But even if you're raised in two different cultures and you manage to travel, that is just a pure, rich journey. And I think it definitely does make you an open person. You know, I know I've worked with people who have been working in, I don't know, Kuwait, or, you know, India and stuff like that. And yeah, if you've gone to international school, been surrounded by all these different multicultural, you know, people, and that's just a de facto, then you do, right? Because you're asking questions. You're like, okay, well, oh, you're from Africa. Oh, what's it like in Africa? But if you got, you know, if you're someone who's sort of born in a small town and I don't know, wherever around in the world, then you're only exposed to those type, you know, similar thing. You're a homogenous group, but you have this heterogeneous group that, you know, you're bouncing off of, and all these different energies. You know, cultures like the ideas, customs, and social behaviors of people. And so, you know, and it's interesting what you say, like this third generation, or what's it say? Third party.
Third culture.
What did you say?
Third culture.
Third culture. It's not even like you know, you're on a next wave. You're, you know, you created your own like lane there. And And I think, you know, there's culture on many levels, as you kind of alluded to. It's culture like that you're born into. It's culture that you're raised in. And so all of these play a part into you. And I think it's a beautiful thing that, you know, I might, you know, go to my, you know, auntie's birthday party, and, you know, we got all the Jamaican good stuff there, you know, and at the end of it, for sure, you're playing Candy song. I don't know if you know the Candy song, Edith.
I think
Do you know the Candy song?
I feel like I've heard it, but I may be wrong.
It's like Candy,
Yes,
Candy.
yes, I do know.
Yeah, that is the anthem, right? Like and it's beautiful, right? And but then if you go to like you know, on my other side, you got like, you know, who you have. You might have Michael Bublé if I go to my nan's, you know. So it's a great thing. But again, I think coming from London, we are so exposed to all different cultures. You know, I feel fortunate, and it's great. And you know, the culture is progressive. You know, it is open naturally. It has to be. If you're not, then you know, you'll soon find out, right? And so it's the freedom to explore, really, just being open and having an open mind. But so I think it shapes us a lot, you know.
Yeah. I think culture as well, like, you know, I don't want people to think that culture is something that you have to be, you know, raised in or brought up in. Like, I think culture should be a word that you can kind of grow into, you know, like people who are born in a small town, and when they leave the small town, everything changes for them. You know, the perspective grows, and they grow as a person. And I think that's part of their culture, right? Like, culture should be something that's subjective rather than something that is you're induced to or whatever. And it's a word and it's a topic that I feel like, you know, can be explored. But, you know, my best friend didn't come to the UK until a certain age, and he felt very, very close to our Chinese culture. And it wasn't until kind of university that he started to feel a part of a westernized British culture. And I think it's something where, you know, sometimes it's hard to be like, yeah, I feel part of, you know, a white culture. I feel like part of the British culture because I've essentially grown up here. And I think it's just really interesting that, like, the word culture is there's a lot of like hush hush around it as well. Like, you don't want to be labeling yourself as like cultured or whatever, right? But then I also feel like you should be able to express yourself in a way where if you've lived a couple years and you've picked up on traits and whatever, and you've picked up on that area's type of community, like vibe and everything, then sure, like, why not? If it's doing it in like a, you know, sensitive, positive, uplifting, evolving way, then why not? But that's just my thoughts about it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, you know, this term culture, to be cultured, because it's actually saying to be multicultured, right? But the word multi is in like brackets. It's like, I'm not saying the multi, but to be cultured is to kind of you know, understand many cultures. And again, I thought it was really interesting what you said, Edith, how culture isn't fixed. You know, it's always moving. It's a dynamic kind of aspect of our lives. What I found really interesting, right? Because growing up, especially amongst like my mom and, you know, my family, you know, there's always an issue saying, oh, I'm English. You know, even now, if people ask you where you're from, and you say, oh, I'm from Lewisham, they're like, no, but where are you really from? And it's usually people from ethnic backgrounds that will question it twice, right? So you kind of grow up saying, you know, oh, I'm Jamaican, or I'm like, you know, I'm African or whatever. But when you go on holiday as an adult, right, and you then interact with people that are not from your country where you were born, they don't know you, you know, and you then say, okay, well, I'm Jamaican, and, you know, and they ask you, okay, oh, where in Jamaica are you from? And you're like, actually, no, I was born in London. And, you know, they're like, oh, okay, so why do you say you're Jamaican? And you say, oh, because it's kind of like the kind of thing that I kind of do. You know, I'm not really English, but even though my passport's British. So, you know, a few years back, I had a revelation, you know, because I'd never really like committed to my my culture based on country. I'd never really committed to that, right? Because, culture is, again, dynamic. It's a huge, so many aspects come into play. But then I found a way to identify that I'm a British person, right? Number one, my passport was red, not anymore, but, kind of. But more importantly, when I think about grime in particular, grime music, it's the kind of people that I see in that music, the kind of people that listen to that music, grew up with that music, are all like me, in one way, shape, or form. They're the similar age group, similar ethnic background, whether it be Caribbean, African, similar idiom or similar language, so we would all speak the same type of slang, similar understandings about what you can and can't do in your house. So, and I noticed actually this group of people with this type of music as a representation is only in this place in the UK. And that is what I identify with. So that way I can say, okay, I am British. When I go and travel and have to, someone asks me, where you're from, or, what's your background, blah, blah, blah. I can confidently say that because that's what I identify with. And that's why, for me, grime is a huge part of my cultural identity, because it's not simply about the music. It's about everybody who is part of that music and how I relate to them, and then how I, relate to myself. But again, like you said, there's so many things that go into culture. And one of the key questions, I think, is like, okay, right, fine, I'm this multicultural, multifaceted piece of, biology. What culture do I firmly pass down to my children? And I'll pose it to both of you. Like, what aspects of you would you think that, that is something that I want to keep going through until the next generation? Again, I don't know who wants to answer first. Edith first, Rich second.
I think it's an interesting one, and it's one that we briefly talked about in our drive. And you know what? I think it's one that I want to leave up to them as a decision. I think that they're going to see many of the multifaceted, multidimensional, multicultural aspects that I have. And it's kind of what I did with my mom. Like, my mom is super, super traditional, but also super, super Western. It's so weird. Like, she'll be super strict about things like boys, or, my nail health, or like everything that, like, in Chinese culture is like the way that you are is like a reflection of your inner health, right? So she's very traditional in that sense. She's very traditional in the sense that it's like curfews, don't go out, don't drink, don't do this. But then when I got my second piercing, she's like, I'll come with you. Let's get them done together. And I'm just like, where's the balance? Like, what? Or she'll have a conversation with me and be like, tell me about the boys, but, you can't have a boyfriend. And I'm just like, I'm so confused. Like, it's confusing growing up, but I think it was so nice because then I felt closer to her, and I also felt like we weren't strict and we weren't tiger moms, is what people call, super strict Asian parents. But I could see that there was some other, cultural aspects that she'd picked up and she'd embodied. And I think I want that for my kids, and I want them to have the decision. Like, my mom used to sit me down and be like, do you want to learn Chinese? And at the time I said no, because I didn't feel like I belonged in the culture and all my friends spoke English. And I was like, never going to use that. Now I'm like, you're an idiot. So, I want to give them that option, but I think I will take 100% certain Chinese cultural aspects and traditions on with me, because things like, the health aspect of things, the mindfulness. My mom is a Buddhist, and so she's been meditating for like 25, 30 years. And I didn't necessarily join in the beginning because I was like, the thought of sitting down for 10 minutes cross-legged in silence scares me. But now I'm like, I love that my mom does that, and I'm really proud about that. So there's some things that I definitely want to take, but the one thing that I will definitely want to, essentially give to my kids and be that influence around them is the openness that my mum defines as like a very westernized thing, being so open, a little bit too open from my mom. So maybe not as open, but definitely open, you know, because I think that, you know, I've seen the stark contrast between my cousins and I. I'm very, very, for a Chinese kid, loud. I do a lot of sport. I'm not the stick thin hashtag A4. That was a massive trend on Twitter.
What's A4? What's A4? Sorry.
It was a really, to be honest, I really hate the trend, but it was, you know, Chinese stereotypes are very skinny and petite. And it was viral on Twitter. And it was about like a woman holding an A4 sheet in front of her waist, and it had to fit within the, I know, horrible. But you know, it's awful. It really isn't, but it is just the standard of beauty over there. Not so much Hong Kong, more like inner mainland China, and it's changing. It is. It's been progressive for years and years, but you know, that for them is beauty. And I feel like, you know, in the West, people just automatically see Asians as like very petite, very skinny, because it's kind of true. And I wasn't that growing up, and so my cousins are actually really, really not by fault or anything, but just we're very different, really different. And my mom has always been like, don't be ashamed of that, like embrace that, like you aren't, you know, you don't have to be that standard, you can be who you want to be. And I know that for her took years and years of her exploring herself, you know, going to Australia, living there for like 2-3 years, realizing that there's so much more than just adhering and upholding certain beauty standards that were, you know, indoctrinated from culture. So that she kind of, you know, gave on to me. But again, there's still parts of her that are very traditional. So, you know, body size and body image is a really weird frictional thing within our family. Like there's some times where she's like, eat more, go out and do more sport, but then don't go to the gym because we don't want you to get big legs. So there's, you know, she's still a tug of war and she's got the friction. But I really love that because at least she can be open with me. So that I want to take to my kids. Still uphold some Chinese values, you know, still celebrate Chinese New Year and stuff like that. And don't swear at me because I will hit you. And don't you dare swear at me until at least you're maybe 18, then fine. We can have that conversation over a glass of wine. You know, like that type of thing. But it's up to them. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that's very forward. And again, it kind of goes to the fact that you've had this sort of pretty open and, you know, diverse upbringing and experiences. And yeah, I feel like I'm pretty much on the same page. Like in my mind, you know, when my dad and my mum got together and were what made me, back then there was a lot of like sort of racial tension, and they got together because they, you know, my mum enjoyed sort of you know, Jamaican culture and that sort of like, you know, edginess, etc. And yeah, I feel like I'm a bit of a product of that progression. You know, years before me, there was this segregation, etc. And I feel like I'm a product of this world progressing in the right direction. And that comes with openness. That comes with like, you know, or that's through openness and progressive thinking. So I feel like that I would want to pass that on to my ones, you know, just to say, be open. Don't sort of have too many preconceptions. Don't want to, you know, imply. What's the word? I don't want to like enforce anything onto them. Right? I don't want to like just give them all of these sort of preconceptions of life because they're a blank canvas. I don't want to just muddy the waters too much. Of course, have points of clarity, but not to a great extent. But then again, on the same note, I do feel like, you know, culture is great. Like when I do go to cultural weddings or cultural events, I do think like, wow, there's this identity there, this strong identity, and I identified, you know, to Jamaica quite a lot because, you know, it's crazy. You know, if someone was to see me, they wouldn't say you're half black, half white. If someone was to see me, they'll say you're black or more black than white. So in a way, I've kind of always more or less veered on that way, and more so as I got older, but and less so when I was younger. So I feel like, you know, for me, what I'd like to pass is just like that openness, that sort of know where you're coming from, know your roots, right? You've got this sort of Hong Kong roots, Aaron, you've got these Caribbean roots. I don't even know which. Oh, Nevis, right? Nevis.
Oh yeah, Nevis. It's like it doesn't even exist in the world.
But a beautiful place, and it's small, and it's again, the Caribbean island generally has this sort of one general like narrative, all these different variations, but in amongst it, it's all Caribbean, right? And so bringing that sort of flavor, and I need to get in touch with that side of myself as well. So I feel like, as we're getting older, I feel like I have to just dig deep a bit more and see where am I from? What do I stand for? Why do I think like this way? So those are the things that I like to sort of hand over. But I also open questions that I need to answer as well to sort of like at least just introduce.
Yeah. It's super interesting because, as we get older, we're kind of building our own culture, right? Like our own, like, all right, so this from my Caribbean side is great, but that doesn't work. And this from my London side is great, but that doesn't work. But actually now here I am in Greece. Either of these things going to work in this environment, So it's like you're always kind of like we're just a work in progress, and our cultures are also kind of like molding our work in progress. So look, I'm conscious of time, but I love the way that this conversation's going, man. I love it. It's a good time, and I think that we should touch on this last subject and just see what happens. So the last subject is about self-worth. Like there's so many aspects of introspection that can be discussed, but are generally not discussed because who's got the time? We live in a busy city. How much can we talk about ourselves? But actually, these types of conversations, at least with yourself, they have such an instrumental part to play in your mental health. So I think personally self-worth is a huge one because there's so many parts, so many instances in life where your value is questioned. Do you know what I mean? If not by yourself, by like some other person. You go off to a job interview, you've got a value. Someone's valued your time. Someone said, all right, yeah, for this salary, you can come along. We think your time is worth 50 grand a year, or we think your time is £10 an hour, or what. So how do you then come to yourself and say, okay, so how valuable is my time to me? What am I doing in that time for me to think, oh, my time is worth £20 an hour or 50, or like, how am I evaluating myself, my time? And, if I was talking about myself and how often I evaluate it, I feel that like I'm like a chart. Do you know what I mean? Like we talk about crypto and trading all the time. My value of myself is like a chart. It's up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. But there are constant narratives that I have within to kind of like bolster me up when I'm down. And we talked about it in the car, Edith, about kind of the ego and self-worth. There's this tiny thin line, and we've talked about it as well on the podcast, Rich. There's this tiny thin line between ego and self-worth, and maybe they're intertwined anyway. I don't know. But some of the inner narratives that I at least have with myself to kind of make me realize, actually, no, you deserve this. You're great. You're a good person. It's just like to kind of keep me on this in this space where there's just kind of like I can continue, So and I think the way that we value ourselves, and the way society values us, again, like they're two very they're intertwined yet separate subjects. Like, okay, how am I going to be valuable to the next girlfriend that I'm going to see? Like, what do I bring to the table? So there's like so many questions, as to your value. Rich, how would you like start by, questioning your value or kind of like calculating your value? What kind of questions would you be like, oh wow, I need to understand the answer to this?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about value, right? I think there is no limit on value of how much we should value ourselves, right? If we put a limit to how much we value ourselves, it's a limit in belief. And we're all superstars of our own movie, right? So I think like literally like there's an old saying of the sky's the limit. That is the case. I think, and that's the kind of frustration really that when I've been in jobs, because when you sign that contract and you accept this annual amount of money or hourly amount, it feels like that is a trap almost. And I've never been okay with that. That's always been like an issue for me. Like that is not my value, right? I know that within. So you got these wage traps, you got these relationship traps, you got these environmental traps. All these traps kind of tell you like, oh, you're only worth this, and you gotta be frosty out there. You gotta stay frosty. I think I think you got to value yourself at the highest, and I think that's how you get. It's almost like the secret 2.0, right? Like you kind of got to tell yourself that you are of this value, and it will, as time will go on, you can't just like keep saying that in your own room and look yourself in. You have to like do stuff, but your own, you can almost like grow towards that, and I think that's the case there. There is no limit. It's only your mind's your limit. Boom. Mic drop.
Mic drop. I agree with what you were saying earlier about how, you have to value yourself and the sky is the limit and your mind is the only thing that is limiting you. It's a self-limiting belief, right? And I think Harry and I were talking about this in the car. We're brought up in a society where you don't necessarily and automatically reward, praise yourself because then you're seen as arrogant. And we're taught to adapt to other people. We're taught to, and then this goes back to your thing about the salary, because it's essentially a physical block on yourself, right? Like that is the only extent you have. That is what you are defined as by someone else. And so that's all you're worth, right? And so then you start to categorize yourself in this box. And actually, like, the way that I see value and how you value yourself is you're enriched by your experiences. You're enriched by your thoughts. You are so different from everyone else. And like you said, actually, Rich, like everyone is the main protagonist in their own film. It just so happens that we keep crossing other people's paths and we do like a feature. We're in one episode and whatever. Like it's that's just life. But the way that I see value is that things like a salary are not your value because they're just parts of things that will enrich your value. Your value is literally just your aura, essentially, right? Like, and it goes back to your ego as well. Like it's how you view yourself, and not from a third party perspective, not in the way that your best friend views you. Like, that question that's like, what are 3 words that your best friend would describe you as? I hate that question because I'm just like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know what they would say. I don't know what they would say X, Y, Z, but I don't know. Like they can say, why don't you ask me how would I describe myself, or how would I describe myself, or who I want to be? Because that question is how you value yourself. And I think it's a really uncomfortable question for a lot of people, when someone says like, how do you, or how would you describe yourself? And people just get all like, oh my God, I don't know. But the question, like, what would your best friend say? It's so easy because they've always in life put themselves in a box, right? Like think about school, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And this kid will be like, I want to be an astronaut. Great. And then 2 years later, they'll be like, so what do you want to be again? They say astronaut. They go, are you sure? You have to do maths. You have to do, I don't know, whatever subjects you need to do for being an astronaut. That already starts to impose self-limiting beliefs, because that question, the way that it's phrased, is like, are you sure that you can? Do you think that you can? And instead of encouraging that person to be like, yes, they're like, okay, but you have to do, I don't know, A-level calculus, I don't know, and that in itself, the way that it's phrased is automatically saying to that person, you don't have that value. You will never be able to have that unless you work extremely hard. When actually you already have the value. Like all these things like learning things and school and exams and picking up like hobbies and all of that, that's not that's not your value. That's just enriching what you already have. Anybody could be anything they want to be, right? You could be, and this is just categorizing and generalizing it to like jobs, but you could be the next president. Anybody could, right? It's just adding more enriching experiences and you know, badges and things to your belt that will make you the ideal candidate for that feature, which is the president. But you already can be. And this goes back to like the idea of like, you know, stepping into your higher self, because you are already the most perfect, ideal, valuable self. You just have to kind of realize that and start doing the things that help you get there, which, to put it very simply, is just being, right? It's just being you. And it's so easy for people to be like, I want to be this, but I don't think I can be because I have to do X, Y, Z. And it's like, let's strip away X, Y, Z and what you have to do and realize that those are not the things that make you that ideal thing you want to be, because you already are. You're just having to kind of propel yourself there. And doing these X, Y things is just giving you the confidence for you to realize, actually, I do deserve it, right? Because value goes back to whether or not you think you deserve something, right? Like whether or not you deserve that 50K, 100K annual salary. You do, but you're letting someone else tell you, oh, now you deserve it, you know? And it's interesting because actually the job and you know, getting a career is actually the perfect example. When you're going towards a promotion, let's use me for example, right? So I'm in marketing and I start off as an assistant, and it's like, you know, people will say you got to wait like 3 to 5 years before promotion. First of all, why? It's true, but whatever, like in the general scheme of things, right? Like you got to wait a couple years, you got to work your way up, you got to learn the skills. Yes, absolutely. But I haven't actually changed as a person. My thoughts have evolved, I've evolved, but I'm still me. Like change is the only constant thing. Of course I'm going to change. Regardless of whether or not I decide to stay in marketing or not, I am going to evolve. I am going to change constantly. I'm just adding extra things, titles, like that are essentially made up in this world. Like, let's be real, they're just made up things, right? And learning how to use different platforms that someone else created to then add value to me. And it's just all accessories. They're just accessories that you're adding to yourself, because you fundamentally are enough. You fundamentally have value no matter what. And you're just adding these accessories for you to then be like, well, great. Now that I've added all these things and all these fancy schmancy things, I get the promotion because it's another title, which then adds on to my value. But then people never get satisfied because they're still looking and seeking for these external things, when really they were enough to begin with. They had enough value to begin with. It's just kind of unraveling it and realizing I'm pretty damn cool, you know, and I have a lot of value to give. And it can be in anything. It doesn't have to be in the job sector, you know. And I think it goes back to, honestly, and this is why in the past couple of years, I think people, and this has become more mainstream, doing things like affirmations and mindfulness and looking within and realizing that actually, regardless of whatever's going on, you are enough. You have enough value because you are simply you, and that's enough. You can outweigh it, sure, but that's just what I view value as. Like, you are value, and you are always going to have more value because you are always growing. You are always changing. So that's value. You are value.
Sure. I can get down with that. I definitely can get down with that. It's so interesting because, like, you know, sometimes in some scenarios, value comes down to consensus, right? Like, so suppose this glass of wine, you know, and I'm going to sell it to you, and I say, yeah, this glass of wine is like £20. You have to agree in order for that value to exist, you know? So I think there's like two sets of values when it comes to a person. You know, there's like a self-value and then a value to everybody else. But I also think that self-value is always going to trump the value to everybody else, you know? And it also leads to the value of everybody else as well. You know, the way that you see yourself, the way that you build yourself up with skills and affirmations, also then becomes what you can then offer to the world, and, you know, your peers, and you know, even if it's just support in words, you know, like you just become the person who's like, actually, when I'm around Aaron, Edith, Rich, you know, he just tells me things that I want to know. Like, he's good to me. He says, oh, you've done a great job on that thing. you know? So it's really quite interesting on, you know, like the way I see it is like you've got the two values, you know, you've got the value to yourself, value to everybody else. And as a man, it's quite interesting because I look at values in a gender space as well, you know, so I value myself as a human being. I look at myself more so as a human being than a man. But, you know, the outside will first see my gender before a human being, generally, you know. So, you know, how do I then, you know, how do the values or the value of a man and a woman look in society? Like all these things make you then, you know, come back and question, okay, like, how can I improve? How can I improve? How can I improve? And like what you said, Edith, and maybe in this period where, you know, the whole world has pretty much been shut down, just having that narrative that I am enough, like just alone, I am enough. I think I said to you in the car as well, like we had the discussion, we both agreed. I was like, you know, I'm just the one cool motherfucker. I just know it. I already know it. Like, it's provable. You can get consensus, whatever you need. But more importantly, I know it. And sometimes in knowing something and affirming it with yourself, you can then confidently go out there and present it for other people to then believe. Right. But yeah, it's such a, in my opinion, like, it's such a huge subject that you don't necessarily have to have with peers, but you definitely need to have this conversation. In my opinion, again, having this conversation with yourself or writing it down or asking key questions that reveal potentially truths that might be slightly uncomfortable, you know, like these processes are like instrumental into, you know, how you behave as a parent, how you behave as a brother or a sister, or how you behave as a human being towards others, you know. And I think yeah, this at least in my life, but I'd like to believe in many of our lives, including yours, that this is a that super valuable process in, you know, evaluating yourself.
I find it very interesting that you mentioned how it's a two-way thing. Like it's the way you speak to yourself, but also the way that you then essentially transfer that energy to other people, right? Like energy is a transaction. Like the way that you give off a certain vibe, energy, aura, whatever you want to call it, frequency, vibration, someone else is going to pick up on it. And it's essentially going to either help them evolve or make them kind of like validate whatever negative self-limiting beliefs are in their head, right? And I find it very interesting that you'll see this typically in parent-children relationships, right? And it's open for debate, it's open for discussion or whatever, but like there's a lot of stuff going around where, you know, therapists and psychiatrists will say like the way that the language, the way that, you know, you are praised, for example, the way that you're told to celebrate or reward yourself if you've done something like an accomplishment in a household, and the way that your parents kind of let you, you know, whether you articulate, you know, your expressions or whatever, or they praise you, kind of follows you as you become an adult. And I think that that's so interesting because, you know, the ego and value, the way you see your self-worth, I think there's a mix and a blend between nature and nurture, right? Like a huge part of it is the way that your environment is and how you're brought up. That can change because you can change and you can start to decide to self-heal. You can look into self-development or whatever, or your peers around you as you grow up, that can change too. But there's a very fine, I think, link where, you know, for example, if someone's been overpraised and all of that, they might not necessarily believe that inherently, but because they've been showered with all that praise, they try to affirm it because that's all they've ever known. And then I think this is where it gets very interesting because, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, this is just personal opinion, but I think the people who are very, very good at their affirmations and presenting themselves in a certain way and being very sure and knowing their value, it might feel hollow and it might feel, dare I say, arrogant to some people because they don't fundamentally believe it in themselves. It's just something that they've picked up from nurture and you know, they want to praise themselves, or they see other people doing it and they're like, I need to praise myself because that's just how it should be and that's how I grow as a person. But the secret is actually believing it, right? Like, and this is the same with manifesting or whatever you want to, you know, do with whatever knowledge in the universe and all of that, is a key thing is believing it. If you don't believe that, if you don't believe you have the value, and you're still adding on these affirmations, and you're still talking to yourself, and you're still trying to do the self-development, you're having all the uncomfortable conversations with yourself and looking from within, and you're trying to believe that you have value, but you don't intrinsically believe that, it gets messy. It gets really, really messy, because then you start to feel resenting to yourself or to others, or you can, people say you come across as arrogant, or you just feel icky about it, whatever. Like it could manifest into anything, right? But I think the huge part of value and, praise, and whether it's in a household environment or in friendships environments or even with yourself, honestly, you have to believe it, because if you don't, that's when the value is, you're just completely contradicting everything that you're trying to do, because value has to come from within, and you have to see it from within, and you have to believe it from within. Because if not, what's the point of you even doing all these things and trying to think and feel all this value? Do you know what I mean? But that just didn't make any sense. But
no, it made sense. Yeah. And I think, but also there's it's kind of a very interesting conundrum where, one person could think they're highly valued, or they value themselves to a very high extent, but the world doesn't, right? So my point is that it's almost, in my mind, that there is an argument to say the value, how much you value yourself, but also how much other people value, right? So your internal value could be also how much value you contribute to other people. So, your work is one thing. Okay, you provide some value to your work, and you can easily measure that. But then you have friends and family, and they can value you too, and that's kind of priceless. It's kind of intangible, but it's what is important to you, that you can lean towards. If you think the value of your wage determines who you are and whatever, then that's you. That's fine. That's how you're driven. That's how you're wired. But if you think the value that you provide to your friends and family is of greater value and greater importance to you as your principle, then that's another thing. That's a dynamic. You can't measure that, but to you, it's important. So I think value is one of those, as you kind of you mentioned, Aaron. It's one of those is a it's a two-way lane almost. You have this external, extrinsic, and intrinsic value. But yeah, there's many layers to the onion. As we peel it back.
Yeah, and you kind of said something that it's almost like it's like a cycle, right? So I say I value myself at 1, yeah, and then society says yes, okay, we value you at 2, and because society has said, oh, we value it at 2, then it builds my own value of self, and to say, okay, now I feel that I'm 3, because now, I said I was 1, society said I was 2, so now I'm 3. And Edith, I think you make such a good point. This is pointless if you don't believe it. Do you know what I mean? This is fine. You might, okay, actually, now I'm going to take that back. It's not entirely pointless, because if other people benefit from it, then it's not pointless, for sure. It's not pointless. But to you as an individual, you're missing the point. If you don't believe this, then there's something in the process that is being missed somewhere. Maybe you're not diving deep enough. Maybe there's something that you are seriously not addressing for some unknown reason. Might need a therapist, God knows. But you might just need to come on the podcast. Who knows? Just talk it out. But yeah, it's so interesting, and it's I found in my own life, through travel, through meeting people on a daily basis, you can kind of tell somebody who believes in their value and somebody who doesn't believe in their value. There's something, I cannot put my finger on what it is, but maybe it's conviction behind words. Maybe it's the ability to admit that they're wrong, comfortably. You can tell the difference between the people that that believe in their value and truly are willing to stand behind their value, and the people that don't. And I think, for the people that don't necessarily, it's It's so easy. Just fucking just say yes. I'm cool. It starts there. I am cool. I am a good person. You know, like a simple affirmation like that. You don't have to say you're cool. If you're not cool, then that's okay. But I am a good person. You know, like something like that is enough to begin the process of believing, you know, your own value. So yeah. Crazy interesting. Anything else, guys?
I do have one thing actually.
Yes.
You know, and I feel like people need to, at least I did, you know, like I think a couple years ago I was really not who I am today. And it's so easy for anyone to tell you to believe in yourself. It's so easy, right? Like, just believe in yourself. You got this. And, you know, on the other side, you're like, what do I believe in? Right? Because it's so easy to, and this is where I don't want toxic affirmations, toxic positivity to come in at all, because you're right. Like, it does start with just saying, I'm good. I'm a good person. I'm good enough. And I know that for some people, it's hard to believe that because of potential circumstances or the way that they've been brought up or nurtured or whatever. And this is where diving into uncomfortable conversations with yourself is very important. But I think people need to realize as well that value isn't just you and how you view yourself, but how you view the way that you are in general with people around you. And this goes back to everything we've been saying, right? Like, it's a two-way street and everything. But it's not a case of, because you know, there's, and this is who I was such a people pleaser back then, and I would provide value to all my friends and never give myself the same value. So everything was for other people, and that was the way that I thought I was providing value. I thought that was how I was valuable, in order to be the best friend, to be the shoulder to cry on, to drop everything and do everything for other people. And I still do that, but it's important now for me to be able to recharge, for me to have my alone time and be like, if I can't reply you right now, it's not that I don't hate you, or it's not that I don't love you or whatever. It's because I need my bloody time. I need to recharge. And don't get me wrong, like, it was a lengthy process to begin with, like, to actually learn how to be selfish, in quotation marks, in that aspect, because that for me was not what I viewed and deemed as valuable. So there's so much self-reflection. Like, that's the uncomfortable conversations, is like, you know, value isn't just how you see yourself and how you are with other people, but like, what is value to you? What does that mean to you? Like, what does that mean for yourself, and not for you as in like, how do you, or how are you perceived by other people and what you do for other people, or whatever, like, you know, being valuable means to you. But what does value intrinsically mean to you? Does that mean, I don't know, wellness, well-being? Does that mean you being selfish for an hour a night and not having to do anything and just be with yourself? Or does that mean that you know what I mean? Like, there's so many different things, and this is what makes it so interesting and subjective, is that, and this is where it clashes, this is where people clash sometimes, because someone's value of how they view value, oh my god, the word value is just being whipped around, might not be that way with someone else, and that person might take offense. And then I think this is where you have to be so concretely confident that you are providing for yourself so that you can provide for someone else. Because there's a saying that's like, you know, you can only kind of look after someone if you've looked after yourself. You can only give someone 100% if you give yourself 100%. And people might not necessarily understand that, especially in the beginning, when you kind of establish that those are your boundaries, those are your values, and those are what you need and what you deem to be important to you in order for you to be the most valuable person. But it's important that you do it. So I mean, lost my point. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that, you know, value shouldn't be just how you are as a person and how you view yourself and all these affirmations that you kind of bind to it, but also, my God, like, there has to be dimensions of the definitions. And I think that's when, you know, you come across someone and you're like, you're so sure of yourself, and you've got it figured out. Like, something about you is so figured out. And I think it's because they've done, it's like going a video game, right? Like, you go through the different levels. It's like level achieved, level unlocked, next one. I think that's like the whole point of life, is getting to know yourself and making sure that you're having these conversations with yourself. You're unlearning things that you once had learned to then learn about yourself, because we go through life learning about other people, adapting to other people, learning to be valuable for other people, other industries, other jobs, or whatever, or school, or whatever, you know, structure, that you kind of lose essences of yourself every single time. And so you have to check yourself and be like, am I providing value for the sake of value, or value from like a very generic umbrella term, or value from a societal way, or am I providing value as well from myself and what I intrinsically want? Because I think it's a very uncomfortable question for someone to be, and this is very generalized, but like someone turning down plans because they just don't feel up for it. I used to feel really uncomfortable for that, because I'd be like, okay, well, I'm not a valuable friend then. I'm not being good. I'm canceling because I'm tired, and I used to really struggle to say no to plans because I never put myself first. Right. So it's so multifaceted, so many dimensions. And I've lost my point, but value, interesting topic.
Absolutely. Edith for president. I think, I think, in all jokes aside, I'm going to level 10 moon level of self-value by Q4 2021. So guys, I'll see you there. If you want to value yourself to the highest level, I'll see you on moon.
Yeah. See you there.
See you there, bro. Look, I think we've raised some valuable points. Did you see what I did?
Did you want to say valuable one more time?
All valid points. Look, Edith, this has been like a monster session for us, man, and it's been so good to have you here, and this conversation has been great. Thanks for coming so much. Really honored to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad that we met on that drive. I truly believe that was a universal thing, because I've never had such a good conversation for an hour. So lovely to meet you, Richie. Like, so lovely to meet you. You guys are great. Love the vibe.
Thank you.
Value.
You too. Yeah. Super. Thanks for coming. You brought a very different dynamic to the whole thing. So really enjoyed our conversation, and we should do it again sometime.
100%.
I think so. I mean, is there anywhere where you want people to contact you? If you want people to contact you, if you've got something going on, you could just say like, no, leave me alone. I value myself too much for you to contact me.
No, it's fine. You guys can find me on Instagram, I guess. My Instagram handle is Edith Fong, but with a double H. So EDITHHFONG. Reason is, my old account got hacked and I could never find it again, and I was like, god damn it, I was the only Edith Fong out there. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
All right, well, look, we'll leave everything in the description. Guys, thanks for listening. Again, just hit the buttons, subscribe, whatever buttons there are, just press all of them all at the same time. Just nice one guys. Thanks for listening.